One power, invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power, indescribable, and you speak of it with every word you say. Mysterious until you know the truth. As simple as the love inside of you. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angels' wings or heaven's door. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love in you and me. One power, one power. different colors, different names. The different is only dangerous when we forget that in the heart we're all the same. And we'll remember once we close our eyes to see that such distances were never meant to be. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Hashem, or heaven's door. It's Muhammad, it's your mind, it's your soul, or it's your sign. It's the universe, it's music, Mother Earth, or Father Time. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? Whatever name you give it, it's the very air we breathe. Oh, it's the power of the love in you and me. One power. Oh, one power is what we are. One power. One power. It's the moment of creation. It's an everlasting peace. It's the freedom of forgiveness. It's the sweetness of release. It's the joy of inspiration. It's the sunshine on your face. It's the birthright of all nations. It's the boundlessness of space. It's the beauty of a baby, the serenity of sleep. It's the anger we abandon, for it's love that's most deep. It's one power. It's one power. What we are is one forever in you and me. It's the power of the love in you and me.
Good morning, and welcome to Unity of Syracuse live streaming. We're glad you're joining us. My name is Maria Isabel Gonzalez. It is an honor to be conducting this service today. Despite this need for social distancing, we are connected. Heart to heart, we are one in Christ consciousness. Say hello in the live chat box there on YouTube. Like this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. So in this connection that transcends time and place, let us begin with the reading of our daily word. The daily word for today, Sunday, May 30th, 2021, is inner peace. Peace grows within me as I remain centered in God. Inner peace, the peace of God that my words can only begin to describe, does not depend on outer circumstances. Peace does not come from any external source. It arises from within me. At a place in consciousness sometimes called the center of my being, peace, like the qualities of God, waits for me to recognize and claim it. I claim inner peace when I remember the truth that God's presence is always with me and within me. As I center my awareness in the divine presence within, peace soothes my feelings and restores order to my thoughts. I move through all circumstances with calm assurance. Peace grows within me as I remain centered in God. Every event of my day contributes to the calm peace of my soul. Those of steadfast mind you keep in peace because they trust you. Isaiah 26:3. As I thought about what peace means and how each of us defines it differently or looks for it differently, I remember that as a child, when I grew up in the heart of a very busy New York City, the noise was endless. Sirens, mothers calling for their youngsters to come in, radios blaring on 2 or 3 different apartments, maybe even a couple arguing in the next one. Always noise. The city that never sleeps, never sleeps. There's always, always noise. So I had to find my own way of finding some inner peace within the confines of this incredibly busy city. So, clever child that I think I was, I simply filled the bathtub with water. And I would submerge myself into this deep tub and just lean my head back until all the water covered my ears. And the only sound that I could hear was the movement of the water in the tub, or as the faucet allowed the water to come into the tub. And for me, that was how I found inner peace. So I wonder, how did you discover inner peace, and what do you do when you want to go to that place where you know that you and God are one? And now, being creatures of habit, most of us who regularly attend our Sunday service sit pretty much in the same place. So right now, take a moment to imagine sitting here. In your mind's eye, notice what the platform looks like. Now, notice who's sitting in front of you or on either side, and picture who is behind you. And from your heart, send love, receive love, and feel the energy of connection of this spiritual family. As we connect virtually, know that we are connected, heart and spirit. We are joined as we take a moment to hold our church community in thought and prayer. Now join me in our statement of being. God is all, both visible and invisible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. I am an individualized expression of God. I am ever one with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. And now for our announcements. A recording of last week's town hall meeting video has been uploaded to YouTube. Follow the link in the constant contact. More authors of all skill levels are needed. Write one post a week reflecting on the daily word for our social media channels. Contact Jacob at the church office. I did this for a while, and it was really quite satisfying. And if you haven't done it, I recommend you do it. You'd be amazed at what you put down on paper after you just think for just a few minutes and share with the rest of us. Monday Meditations with Ann Wall next meets on June 7th at 7 via Zoom. Social justice discussion groups are off this week. See you again next week on June 7th and 8th. Again, something that I participate in, and I know that if you haven't joined us, you really will get a lot out of these Zoom meetings. Amazing the things that come out. Saturday's Lunch on the Lawn has resumed, weather permitting, starting at 1 p.m. Again, it's nice to just be able to sit outside in a circle and know that these are the people you know and love, and you don't even have to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated. Interfaith Works is hosting a community garden pickup at the Apostolic Church of Jesus Christ on Cortlandt Ave on Saturday, June 12th. There will be garden education and goodie bags to take home. Duck Race to End Racism, June 26th. Tickets, $5 or $10, are on sale. Every duck ticket sold raises funds for both the Center for Dialogue and Unity of Syracuse. Now I'd like to take a moment to welcome today's guests. Unity is a positive, practical approach to Christianity. We are culturally Christian and spiritually unlimited. We honor the many paths to God. If you're a first-time viewer, please contact the office via phone or email so that we can be in contact with you. Blessings to you for joining in. Now we're going to go over our 5 basic principles. God is the source and creator of all. God is good and present everywhere. That was number 1. Number 2, we are spiritual beings created in God's image. Number 3, we create our life experiences through our way of thinking. Very important. Number 4, there is power in affirmative prayer. And number 5, we live these spiritual principles. Now, take a moment to reflect on how one or more of these principles has shown up in your life this past week. Perhaps you may want to share those by calling our office. Now we've come to our part in our service, which we call the blessing of the prayer requests. And Ray, who's our main speaker, will be doing the prayer box. Ray, thank you.
Good morning. As you know, Unity was founded on prayer. It's been consistently in use for over 130 years, I guess. And that is quite a feat. And this morning we will take that energy that Daniel sang about this morning, that power of the love that is you and me, and we will seek to find the answers to all those things we want in our lives, but we know that we will achieve them. We will be given whatever it is we need to be successful in the lives we create in that third principle. Because we are steadfast in peace, and we are held in that. Now this morning as we enter into prayer, I would also like to take a moment to recognize that it is Memorial Day weekend. And I would like us to take a moment to remember and honor the men and women who have given their lives in service to our country. I would also like to include this morning the over 500,000 people who have lost their lives to COVID. So many of them also gave their lives in service to their country. They gave their lives in service to us. They were doctors and nurses and teachers and policemen and women, store clerks and nursing home employees and pastors and government workers. They came from all walks of life, and each one of them spent their lives trying to make our lives a little better. They were our families of birth and our families of choice. They were members of our Unity family. They were, and always will be, precious. There is a lovely poem that was written by Lawrence Binion entitled For the Fallen. It was written in 1914 as an ode to the first group of young Englishmen that died in World War I. I didn't learn about the poem until the AIDS epidemic, when one stanza of this poem was set to music. As we move into this moment of remembrance, I will share that with you as our prayer for today. They shall not grow old as we who are left grow old. Age will not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. May they rest in peace, and may those of us who mourn them find peace and comfort in God's healing light. Thank you.
When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray.
If you are in need of prayer today, I believe there might be prayer chaplains available during the coffee hour at 12:15, or you can use Unity's 24-hour prayer service, and you can call 1-800-NOW-PRAY, and that is a beautiful experience as well. This morning we are going to be discussing the spiritual power of power. That is the power of the month. Spiritual power is the energy that we use in that time of creation. It is the focus of our third principle that states that we will create our experiences with the thoughts that we hold in mind. We also learn here that we will continue to breathe life into those thoughts and ideas through the power of our voice, be that written or spoken. And we do that by using affirmations and proclamations. So we learn here to be a little cautious with our words, because the principle really doesn't have a sense of judgment. So we can affirm a negative thought just as easily as a positive one. We take special care when we attach words to the phrase, I am. For we know that they will define us in ways that we might not always understand, but we will always experience. Charles Fillmore, one of our Unity co-founders, wrote in The Revealing Word that power is the energy we use to create, but he mentions one requirement for the successful use of power, and that is this, quote, man must cooperate with principle, unquote. Winifred Hausman echoes that in her book about the 12 powers, and the title of her book is Your God-Given Potential. When she writes, power, we must understand, is not an end in itself, not a goal to be sought. It is not to be used for selfish gain or the satisfaction of the personal ego, but for the forward movement, spiritual movement of the whole. In other words, we should seek the greatest good. To be able to cooperate with principle and create a greater good, we must be able to delineate the difference between power for power's sake and a power that cooperates. And that can be a little difficult because sometimes they can feel very much the same. It is a balancing act. We learn over time that personal power must also contain just the sliver of spirit. We learn with experience that personal power will sometimes demand that we step away from spirit and dive deeply into the human condition to find the power within ourselves. By accepting both without judgment, we allow ourselves to experience the wholeness of life. So I'm going to begin today's lesson with a reading from Mark Nepo. He wrote a book called The Endless Practice, and the subtitle is Becoming Who You Were Born to Be. I came across it as I researched my materials for today, and I'm going to use it for a springboard once I go get it. This is called All Things Are True. When I finally tire of pursuing what I think is important, a paradox keeps whispering to me. It's always there like a breeze that shows me the underside of leaves. What I keep hearing is that all things are true, which does not mean that all things are just or fair or even acceptable, but all things contain truth. Who we are and who we're not, what we want and what we're given, how we are loved and how we are hurt, what we know and all that we don't. All things are true, and only an open heart can make sense of how they go together. When we keep choosing between right and wrong, we spend our energy sorting life rather than living it. And the winnowing of everything that is not like us makes our sense of truth too small. Somewhere along the way, we're taught to uphold only what we think is right, is the desired state of perfection, as if a world that is only like us could protect us from the hardships of living. When the quest for perfection only narrows to an uninhabitable point, while the wholeness of life widens to include everything. Ultimately, which is the healthier home? The wholeness or the loneliness of the attempts at perfection, or the messy company of wholeness? Experience keeps leading me to an all-encompassing sense of truth, filled with resources that rush in from all places, every direction. Only from the wholeness of life can we see how to navigate this mystery with all its hardships and blessings. When we keep choosing between right and wrong, we spend our energy sorting life rather than living it. That is what I would like you to remember about today's lesson. So I'm going to spend some of the morning dissecting that message, because the energy that he speaks about, the energy that we spend in doing that, that is our spiritual power. Now, I will also be referencing a book that is titled Think Again by Adam Grant. And the subtitle of his book is The Power of Knowing What You Do Not Know. So I'm going to start with this phrase by Nebo. The winnowing of everything that is not like us makes our sense of truth too small. Now, I spent most of my career working with teenagers, and I don't believe that there's any other time in life that demands that everyone and everything around us look and think and act like we do, quite like adolescence. It is our ironic statement, our statement of individuality. Now, there is an exaggerated need for fairness and acceptance. One of the things that I was able to do in Liverpool, the place I worked, was to help establish a peer mediation center. And in that place, I got to experience power in both ways. It was created to provide a space for the kids to settle their grievances before they got out of hand and they ended up in the discipline system. So students were trained in the art of listening. There were rigid rules for safety, so nobody gets out of their seat. There was a script they had to use. And in the beginning, they co-counseled with me until they could prove themselves. And I need to tell you just how amazing that was to watch these young people come into their own. Now, this was occurring just at the beginning of the effects of social media on schools. Let's put it that way. So way, way back, like the onset of MySpace, okay? And the kids clearly learned that they could speak their minds, so to speak, in places that their parents couldn't find them. So we were dealing with that. Teens, of course, are just a work in progress, like all of us. And this time in our life might be that place where, as Nepo says, where we learn to uphold what we think is right. As adults, we've got to help them find the gray areas in life, but we can only do that if we can do that for ourselves, because we can only teach what we know. Okay? It seems we're all a work in progress. Now, many teens have a very heightened sense of powerlessness, and to offset that, they use whatever personal power they can. There's a great desire to carve out their own path, and that doesn't necessarily change with age, does it? It just tempers. They know and they use the power of their words to hurt each other in ways that surprise us. They gossip and accuse and triangulate, abandon and exile each other with frequency, all the while longing to be seen and to be accepted. And this way of being may also not change with age. This unbalanced, undeveloped sense of power set against the emotional vulnerability inherent in adolescence, that created a lot of firestorms. Broken hearts, a lot of racial tensions, there were lost friendships, sports rivalries, you name it. Every day the kids were in the room. What always amazed me was their ability to find the truth that can be found in the center of right and wrong. What always amazed me was their ability to really seek the real issues underneath the argument. Those issues of how we are loved and how we are hurt. Their ability to search for the rest of the story, and they did that by telling the truth. Kids really appreciate and respect the truth. They will search for it to find it as though it was a needle in a haystack. Now, somewhere in the midst of all the finger pointing, there would become a shift. A new piece of information would come forward that would turn the page. For one child would take the risk to dive into the pain rather than the anger. One child would share a piece of themselves that would help the other better understand. A piece of information that we did not know, and that would make all the difference. And the power structure would begin to shift. Spirits moved. As someone would own themselves and tears would flow and apologies would begin, and we learned how to release our anger in healthier ways. Personal power now became the spiritual powers of forgiveness and compassion and understanding. I watched children cooperating with principle. What I was witnessing was something that Anne Lamott refers to as the movement of grace. The movement of grace is the gift that we are given the moment we allow the shift to happen, the moment we let go of our need to be right. It will bring us back into balance by pointing to the greater good, by pointing the way out of the darkness and back into the light. And all we need to do is let it happen. Do you remember learning those lessons as a young person? Back in the time when love flowed from us like fountains, before we began to thicken our skin? I would suspect that if we were to be honest with ourselves this morning, we could all identify a situation in our lives that requires searching for the truth hidden in the center of right and wrong, buried beneath how we are hurt. Maybe we're here this very moment to listen to this talk because it's time for us to search for that needle. Whatever we are facing, we can always trust in the movement of grace. Now, the next comparison that I'd like to make this morning is based on Grant's book, in the section there where he talks about the power of our voice. So I'll begin by asking you this. Do you trust the sound of your own voice? And I'm not talking about that still small voice we seek to soothe ourselves, but the very human voice that we take out into the universe with us every day. Do you trust the sound of your own voice? Do you say what you mean? Do you mean what you say? And do you walk your talk? I gave a talk a while ago where I used this term, the fragile human voice, for I believe that it is. We express our power with our fragile human voice. Spiritual power provides us with an air of confidence. We learn to speak and act with confidence. However, confidence is closely connected to the faith that we have in what we tell ourselves about ourselves, what we believe about ourselves. Confidence alone can easily be eroded by the careless words of somebody else. For example, let's just say you have an important event to attend with your partner. And one of those events where it's important for you to look good. So you've gone out and got the new outfit, and you've spent extra time on detail and all that. And you've looked in the mirror and you've checked it all out, and you say, "Oh, you look great." And then you leave the bedroom and say, "I'm ready to go." And your partner says, "Are you wearing that?" 4 words. "Are you wearing that?" If we're on solid ground, we answer, "Yes, let's go." But I do believe that most of us would add one more word. "Yes, why?" To which they would answer, "Oh, nothing. You look fine." Fine, you look fine. In that moment, there exists the possibility that the evening's not going to go the way we want it to. It all depends on the balance of power within that relationship and the relationship that we have with ourselves. Can we go forward still believing in the "you look great" person, or do we take 20 extra minutes and change to satisfy the other? Now, I know that's simplistic, but I think you get the idea. Here's my next voice question. I will own that this is true for me. Does the little voice that might sound like your mother ever whisper to you, "Listen to yourself. Listen to yourself"? If you do that, do you have the courage to do it? Because quite often when we get that little message to listen to ourselves, it's because we're out of balance. We're a little full of ourselves, overconfident, arrogant, maybe. Now, one section of Grant's book is also about the questions of right and wrong. More accurately, he talks about how we argue. His initial premise is very much like the work of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. We read his book a few years ago, The 5 Levels of Attachment. You may recall that the levels begin with the authentic self, and they go from authentic self to preference, identity, internalization, and finally fanaticism. Each stage represents a deeper attachment to an image of self, and the only place that we are truly free is at that authentic self, where we can experience the wholeness of life and it doesn't begin to define us. Fanaticism is the polar opposite, and that demands that everything in the world look and act like we do. Now, you may recognize that happening in the world today, especially in politics, and maybe in our own lives today, if we find ourselves in situations where we are refusing to see or hear the other. Grant's premise is very much the same. He tells us that the more we attach ourselves to our thoughts, the more likely that those thoughts will turn into truths, little truths, and our opinions will become facts. So the more attached we become, the more we will need to defend our worldview. To break the cycle, he says, we must listen to ourselves. And he cites the work of someone named Phil Tetlock, who studied argument. And he suggests that when we fall into that defense mode, we will commonly use the voices and tools of 3 distinct characters: the prosecutor, the preacher, or the politician. And all 3 roles have a common purpose, and that's to get the other person to change their minds. Now, the prosecutor uses data, dates and times and experiences, and they just try to cut holes in the other person's argument. So you're going to hear things like, remember the time that you... Now, the preacher uses the moral argument. There's something wrong here if you don't understand that I have the high ground, and you may sense a little guilt. The politician wants you to like him, wants you to support him. And he's going to promise you stuff and lobby you to adopt his agenda. But there's also that hidden agenda. If none of these methods work, and we usually do try to use all three if the thing is important to us, the argument can just dissolve into the name calling. There's no longer a problem with your argument, but there's clearly something wrong with you. Now, have you ever found yourself playing out any of those roles? I recognize myself in all three, and I will admit to the name calling. I will also admit that my preferred preference is prosecutor, okay? But I've been known to use political bribery with my children because money talks, doesn't it, Maria? Grant tells us that as long as we engage solely in this form of interplay, that nothing is going to change, no one's going to change their minds, there'll be no progress. He addresses that issue of change and the fact that many of us just claim, well, I don't like change. He doesn't buy that. People expect change, he says. People anticipate and initiate change all the time. They welcome it, in fact, as long as it occurs in anything other than themselves. For we become so self-focused in all the while that we are trying to manipulate the other, it never occurs to us that it is us that could change. For the prosecutor would lose his case, and the preacher would lose the moral high ground, and the politician would lose his constituency, and we would lose face. One solution that we might come to is simply to agree to disagree. Grant suggests that, well, this might temporarily ease the tension. In reality, it simply allows us to return to our corners to rest until it is time to re-enter the ring. There is never growth or progress by agreeing to disagree, just wasted energy. So we must learn to change the focus. Grant offers us a solution if we find ourselves stuck there. While Grant does not use the term spiritual in his work, I'm going to apply the term this morning. He suggests that what is needed is learning to know what we do not know. We gain that ability by adopting the spiritual quality of humility. Webster defines humility as freedom from pride and arrogance. In the Revealing Word, Fillmore says that it is the recognition that the personal man by himself is ineffectual. He quotes John 5:30 that states, I can of myself do nothing. I can of myself do nothing. Humility allows us to open ourselves up to that world of infinite possibility. It allows for the possibility for all things to be true. It softens us, and it welcomes the rest of the story. In fact, he suggests that we should consider seeking the joy to be found in being wrong, for that is what opens us up to learning or growth, or as Leland reminded us, transformation. Humility helps us switch from that place where we deem things right and wrong, and we begin to search for common ground. We cease to argue, and we seek common value. We find solutions in our common value: faith, kindness, compassion, acceptance, forgiveness, love. Unity of Syracuse has adopted many of these values as a way of expressing who we are as a community. Now, if you've been around here for a little while, you might recall that we've had some really tough discussions about how things should be. And we have been a house divided by the use of power for power's sake. It was the application of those values that were our strength. They were the things that brought us back into balance, that led us back to that place where open hearts could put things back together. Humility allowed us to remember that we are in this together. United in Christ consciousness, we are in this all together. I can of myself do nothing. If you've ever read the work of Byron Katie, you might remember her process that allows us to question truth, to seek what we value instead of what we want, and to find the freedom in releasing those things that no longer serve us. Who would we be without those thoughts? Our values are the tools we use to counterbalance our prosecutors and our preachers and our politicians. Every day we get to choose, and there is such power in the power of choice. We can choose to experience power by subjugating another person or by freeing a chained soul. Which is the greater good? Grant keeps it simple. He simply tells us to seek confident humility. Seek confident humility. From this place of balance, we can stand firmly in what it is we know and believe to be true, and still keep our minds open to learning new ways of thought and growth. And finally, I'm going to share with you that I was struck at how clearly I think Nepo's writing speaks to the world we may be living in, how clearly it speaks to how we may be responding to the many questions and concerns of the social and political and legal issues of the day, those issues that are being brought to the surface, thereby allowing the noise of out there to disturb the peace of in here. We give our power away to the noise out there. I find this especially true as we begin to experience a newfound sense of freedom as we emerge from COVID. I find it ironic that as we are finding ourselves more able to be in physical contact with one another, we may also be isolating ourselves from anyone that does not hold our worldview. Ironic that as we yearn for the world to open back up, we insist on making it smaller by refusing to hear anything we don't want to. Ironic that as we talk of the power of God that protects us, that fortress that Mark talked about a couple weeks ago, we can choose instead to entomb ourselves in a fortress of our own defense mechanisms. We will be disappointed if we seek our safety there, for we will never find a greater good in isolation. Ironic that our ability to extend a hand that offers friendship may have become a bridge too far if the hand does not look like ours. It worries me, as I hope it worries you. Now, I do not assume to know your truth, but I will share with you this morning that Nepo's piece, All Things Are True, it brought me up a little short. I had to do one of those little dives into my human condition to see how I was showing up in the world, because there were glimpses of truth in that reading. I realized that even this far into my spiritual journey, I could still get lost in bemoaning all that I'm not, instead of simply taking my seat at the table. I can envy all that you have, instead of basking in the joy of all that I've been given. And I still have moments where I believe that I have all the answers. And I strand myself on that uninhabitable point of perfection. I struggle with trust, so friendship can elude me. But you know that about me. And I am grateful that you have welcomed me into your circles of unconditional love. I heard Reverend Edith proclaiming, "We are how God gets around." As I read that phrase, that filled with the resources that rush in from every direction. So thank you for being my resources. When he spoke of navigating the mystery of all its hardships and blessings, I came to understand that I become someone else's hardship anytime I turn my back on their truth. I understand the powerful blessing to be found in forgiveness, so I will ask for that blessing this morning if I have caused you any offense. I have learned here not to judge myself too harshly. I have come far enough to know that it's a balancing act. Sometimes we will soar to the heights of our higher selves, and sometimes we will dive deeply into our human condition. That is the fullness of life. When we keep choosing between right and wrong, we spend our energy sorting life rather than living it. The world may currently seem out of balance, but you and I, we have the power to pray and love it back into shape. And as we do, let us seek that place that Nepo calls the messy company of wholeness. You are needed there. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm still here. As we go into meditation, if you have never given yourself the gift of reading the endless practice, do that for yourself. It's beautiful. As we take the time to settle and we find that place within ourselves that this morning's daily word spoke to, that center of our being. That center of our being where the light shines. Let us find that light and let it shine out from us in all directions. As I lead you into meditation with this reading called Through the Pinhole of My Fear. Who will we be once we truly listen to each other? What will shine through when we prune our expectations and judgments? Who will I be once I truly listen to myself? Once I cut back my stubborn growth which chokes my view of the sky? This is not a pruning to be done with shears, but by letting the warmth of our heart do its work. I want to put down my oldest patterns so my heart won't have to work so hard. I think I can fulfill my trust in oneness if I can move the center of my being through the pinhole of my fear. And I'm not sure what this means, other than to let my soul, the carrier of my being, emanate in all directions like the sun, till it softens and transforms this small tight circle that is my fear. It doesn't matter what I've attached that fear to or what I like to blame it on. Only the light of my being, found in the trust that we're born with, the trust that we return to, only that isness, allowed to glow, can break the pinhole trance that fear holds upon me, on you. For fear keeps its control by blocking everything else out, by making us believe that the world is limited to the canopy of our fear. Being washes that falseness away. As we seek our beingness in the silence. Let yourself take that deep breath in, and knowing that you can return to this place anytime that you choose. And as we return ourselves to this particular time and place, there's a Rumi quote, beyond the ideas of wrongness and rightness, there is a field. I will meet you there.
Thank you so much, Ray. You've given us a lot to think about. Now for our mission statement. Unity of Syracuse inspires, awakens, and transforms lives through unlimited love, prayer, and service. Now is the time in our service when we would receive the tithes, gifts, and love offerings. We invite you to give through the donate link there at the top of the video description box, or to mail your gift to Unity of Syracuse, 300 West Seneca Turnpike, Syracuse, New York, 13207. You may wish instead to sign up for regular electronic giving. Please contact the office for this. Reaffirm. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. You are my source. Now for the blessing of the children. Please note that there is a live Zoom meeting for our youth and family ministry at 10 a.m. each Sunday. Know that we have a thriving and edifying youth and family ministry. We bless our children wherever they are. We see them surrounded by love and light throughout the week. And now for our prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. We are the light. The love of God enfolds us. We are the love. The power of God protects us. We are the power. The presence of God watches over us. We are the presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you. Namaste. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Stay safe. And God bless all our veterans.
Let this be the moment now.